Hi, today I'm making sauerkraut with caraway seed. The ingredients are a fresh green cabbage, salt without iodine, as iodine will interfere with the bacteria's growth, and caraway seed. The equipment you need are a food scale, a 64-ounce half-gallon wide-mouthed mason jar. Note, not a regular mouth mason jar. And also a canning funnel that fits onto the mason jar. For the glass jar, sterilize it by pouring a little bit of boiling water into it first. Pour it out, then pour more boiling water and swish it around. And then a fermentation spring made by Ball. If you're starting out fermenting, use the fermented lid included in the Ball fermentation kit. If you like a foolproof fermenting reaction, I highly recommend the Nourished Essentials vacuum lid, the one with the orange valve, as it ensures that you won't get any contaminants in your fermentation. The Nourished Essentials fermentation lids come with a pump that removes air. Then have a bowl that can hold the spring and the lid and the canning funnel so that you can sterilize them all with boiling water. Put them in a bowl and pour boiling water over them, then pour away the water. You'll also need a big metal bowl to hold the chopped cabbage, a kitchen knife, a pair of tongs, and a stick or rolling pin to press the cabbage into the jar. Okay, to prepare the cabbage, give it a quick rinse. Then remove the outer leaves that may be a bit withered or damaged. Then save one entire leaf. Put it aside as it will be used to cover the top of all the chopped up cabbage. Next, cut the cabbage into wedges. Then take the large metal bowl and weigh it on the scale. Write down the weight of the bowl in grams. Next, cut the cabbage into 1 centimeter thick slices and put it into the metal bowl. Then take the bowl with the chopped cabbage and the whole piece of cabbage leaf you saved in the beginning and weigh it. Write down the total weight of the cabbage and the bowl in grams. Calculate the weight of the cabbage by subtracting the weight of the bowl from the weight of the cabbage and the bowl. The weight of the cabbage is equal to the weight of the cabbage and the bowl minus the weight of the bowl alone. Next, calculate how much salt to add to the cabbage for a 2% salt concentration. Take the weight of the cabbage that you calculated previously and multiply it by 2 and then divide it by 100. Then you'll get the number of grams of salt needed to make a 2% salt concentration when added to the cabbage that you have. Using the weight of the salt that you calculated, measure out that amount of salt into a bowl that has been zeroed. So for my batch of cabbage, I need to add 32 grams of salt. I'll keep on adding salt until I reach 32 grams, or take away salt until you reach 32 grams. Then just pour the salt onto the chopped cabbage. Try to mix it a bit so that the salt is distributed among the cabbage, but it doesn't need to be mixed that well. I had to transfer the cabbage to a bigger metal bowl as it wasn't big enough for me to move the chopped cabbage around. Let the cabbage and salt sit together for about 10 to 15 minutes until there's some water released from the cabbage at the bottom of the bowl. Then add 1 tablespoon of caraway seeds. Sprinkle it around the cabbage and mix with the tongs. Then pack the cabbage into the 64-ounce jar with the canning funnel at the mouth of the jar. You don't necessarily need a funnel, but it gets really messy with the cabbage pieces falling outside of the jar. So I find the funnel really useful in getting all the cabbage into the jar. After putting a few inches of cabbage into the jar, use a stick or rolling pin to press the cabbage down. The goal is to pack the cabbage well so that there's as little air gap as possible, as the good bacteria grow without oxygen, and you also want to be able to fit in as much cabbage into the jar as possible, as it will take 4 weeks for it to ferment. A very important part of making a successful batch of sauerkraut is to leave 3 to 4 inches of empty space at the top of the jar. It's very tempting to try to fit all of the chopped cabbage into the jar, which I've done numerous times, but I end up with a lot more headache when the fermentation overflows later on. So try to resist the temptation of overfilling, even though you will end up with cabbage that you can't fit into the jar. Use the excess cabbage in a salad or cook it in a dish. But do pour all of the liquid into the jar to cover the cabbage up. Now is the time to use the whole piece of cabbage leaf you saved in the beginning. Fold it so that it's about the same size and shape as the top of the chopped cabbage. Lay it down flat and push it to the edges of the jar so that the leaf covers the chopped cabbage as best as you can. Then put the fermentation spring on top of the cabbage leaf, with the flat part of the spring touching the cabbage leaf. Press the spring down and twist the lid on, either the ball fermentation lid or the Nourished Essentials fermentation lid. If you're using the Nourished Essentials lid, take the vacuum pump with the handle pushed down, put it on the plastic orange valve, then pull up the handle. Without pressing down on the pump, remove the pump from the lid, then press down on the handle. Do not push the handle down when the pump is connected to the lid, otherwise air will go back into the jar. I like to do this twice to remove air from the jar. Usually if the cabbage is fresh, you'll see that the water from the cabbage covers most of the cabbage. Even if the cabbage is above the water, it's okay, as by the next day more water will come out from the cabbage. As you can see here, after a day, the cabbage is now entirely covered by water. More water has come out and the cabbage is more compressed. One reason why I like the ball fermentation spring so much is the spring will continue to press downwards, which keeps the cabbage under the water. Over the next few days, you may see some bubbles. That's the carbon dioxide from the bacteria growing. You can see that there's still empty space at the top of the jar, so there's no need to worry about the liquid overflowing with the bubbling from the reaction. Now all you need to do is to put it in a cool place and wait for 4 weeks. I like to write down the start date and the date when the sauerkraut will be ready. When the sauerkraut is ready, you can take the fermentation lid and spring out, then put a regular lid on the jar and keep it in the refrigerator. Let me know in the comments how your sauerkraut turned out and what flavor of sauerkraut you made.